What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and this is the last Mosh Pit review video I'm doing for 2019, and this is gonna be a good one. For anybody who wants to see me do more album reviews for albums I didn't get a chance to listen to, go follow me on Twitter at ThrashManiac99. A link for my Twitter should be in the description as always, just in case. But nonetheless, any other reviews I'm doing, it'll be solely on Twitter for albums I didn't get to check out, such as like Arch Matheos, Alcest, Leprous, Agnostic Front. There are quite a few albums I haven't got to listen to or listen to all the way through that I do need to review over on Twitter. But enough gawking about Twitter, let's get to this review, and this is perhaps the final big band album of 2019, and it happens to come out on Black Friday, and well, this is a big one from underground legends Cattle Decapitation, and the album is called Death Atlas. Brief history lesson for some of you who watch this channel that may not be completely or at all familiar with Cattle Decapitation. So Cattle Decapitation started all the way back in 1996, and in their first few years of their inception, Travis Ryan and the gang were just releasing demos and one EP called Human Jerky in '99 before releasing their first album, which I can't even pronounce or remember what the title is, but they started out as a more gore grind band, like taking influence from bands like Carcass, Petago, and any other gore grind band of the time, and doing their own American their own Southern California version of it on their first album and their early demos and EPs. Then eventually, after their first album, which, to be honest, their first album wasn't quite well received, I think is because gore grind as a whole isn't very well received by a lot of fans, depending on who they are. But then their second album, To Serve Man, came out in 2002, and they go to Metal Blade Records, and their production gets so much better. It's like night and day with their production sounds on the first two records. And even though Serve to Man was a great step up, still wasn't quite there for Cattle yet, but then they release Humanure a couple years later, and that's when the band started to really take off in terms of popularity. And also, little sound changes started coming in around this time. Like, at first, they were gore grind, then they kind of went more death grind, and then starting from Karma Bloody Karma, which was the album after Humanure, they started getting a lot more into the death metal side of their sound, and even as far as going into technical death metal or progressive death metal. Like, the songwriting has gotten more progressive as the albums have went along. The grindcore influence is a lot less the further you get into their catalog. So you could honestly make the argument that they don't really have a grindcore element to their music really anymore. Really ever since, I would say, Harvest Floor, through to Monolith of Inhumanity, through to the Anthropocene Extinction, and now to Death Atlas. While there are blast beats over the years, it's more kind of tech death oriented than grindcore, because at this point, like, tech death has kind of overtaken grindcore in terms of the chaos, depending on the band. But nonetheless, we are now going to talk about Death Atlas, and first thing I gotta say is just whoa. Just whoa. And also another note that I completely forgot to mention, early on in Cattle Decapitation's career, their lyrics were more gory as well as animal supremacy oriented, and then over the years, their lyrics have changed drastically to this misanthropic, anti-human, apocalyptic imagery that they project on their lyrics. Travis Ryan, the vocalist, he's really talking about issues that nobody wants to talk about. No one else wants to talk about. While me personally, I'm not 100% on board with his philosophies and everything. Like, I'm not a vegetarian, but I do respect that he wants to say what he wants, and some things I can agree with, other things not so much, but regardless, talented vocalist and from all accounts super nice guy in interviews I've seen. But now let's get to the album. As I said, lyrically, this album is probably their most bleak album that they've ever done, like top to bottom. You want to talk about brutally honest, dark, apocalyptic lyrics, this is definitely it. After all, I feel like, I don't know if they would consider this, I don't know if if Travis and the band would call this a concept album, but I think you could make a case that this album could be considered a concept album, all about climate change and how in like 1,000 years or maybe 500 years the world's gonna be in a terrible state because of climate change and what people have been doing to the oceans and stuff like that. But hey, there are at least groups out there that are doing their best to clean up the oceans. But nonetheless, enough political stuff. Let's get to the music. So the after the first like transitional track, the anthropogenic and transmission, which there are a few of these like transitionary songs, goes into the geo side, and right off the bat you're in for a total onslaught of brutality in terms of the blast beats, the riffs, the music, the vocals. Still Be Still Our Bleeding Hearts kind of continues that sensibility. Vulture Us, however, which is one of the longest songs of the album at about 5 minutes, you start to hear, like, another aspect of Decapitation sound that I find quite unique is the vocal style of Travis Ryan. His gutturals definitely remind you of bands such as Cannibal Corpse, Broken Hope, Suffocation, and a few others I can't name off right now. But he also does these high screaming vocals you could consider to be almost black metal, but he has this unique style of melodic vocals, even though it's clean-ish vocals, like he screams in key with the guitars. And Vulture Us, you got a lot of that on this track. So, and that's one thing I love about Travis's voice, is that he's able to scream in a melodic sense on key with the guitars to the point where you could mistake it for clean vocals, even though it's almost clean. It's kind of like another guy I could compare this kind of style to, not in terms of screaming, but in terms of like clean and unclean combination, would be Joe from Gojira, who has his unique style where you could sing it in clean or you can sing it in guttural, because it's sort of like the balance. It's perfectly balanced, and Travis kind of does that, but in a higher register. The Great Dying Part 1, one of a few more narrated tracks before you get into the first two singles, One Day Closer to the End of the World and Bring Back the Plague. One Day Closer to the End of the World, I thought out of those two singles was the strongest, and it was the first one. And this song blew my fucking mind whenever I heard it. Like, the music is just every which way possible. The vocals, absolutely amazing, especially the midsection of the song, where you get this real nice melodic section within the guitars and the vocals. And also the first real bits of clean vocals, actual clean vocals, show up for a brief moment towards the end of this song. Then bring Back the Plague. I don't know why I say bring twice. Oh yeah. But yeah, Bring Back the Plague was a little longer of a song and for a single, but it was another example of just being all over the place musically, and in a good way. And vocally all over the place too, and more melodic verses with Travis's key screaming. I really don't know what you can call that vocal approach. Absolute Destitute was another track that kind of continues in that veneer, and also really pushing boundaries in terms of like what genres they're really going for. There was a little bit of a thrash element to it, a little touch of grinds, and Also, a little bit of technicality involved. The Great Dying Part 2, continuing that narration aspect. Finish them. You want to talk about bleak lyrics? Like, this is just all about, like, annihilating people off of this planet to preserve it and whatnot. Is Travis Ryan secretly Thanos? I wonder that. And then you want to talk about a really brutally honest song title. The next track, With All Disrespect. Pretty self-explanatory. Then you get to the final 3 tracks that flow together nicely and are connected to one another. Time's Cruel Curtain, which is the second longest song at 5.5 minutes. And again, kind of keeping on what this album's been able to project. Technicality, a little bit of melody, a lot of brutality. Before you getting into the final transitionary song, but this was definitely the best transitionary part of the album, the song The Unerasable Past, with this like robotic narration all about climate change and methane and stuff like that, before Travis releases probably his most beautiful actual clean vocal pattern of the album, before you get right into the final track, the opening onslaught of unbelievable brutality with the title track, Death Atlas, which is the longest song of the album, and I think the longest song in Cattle Decapitation history at a little over 9 minutes. Let me tell you, this song alone makes this album absolutely amazing. You know, you get some breaks, you get a little breakdown in the song with a very low guttural growl, and you got these slower parts, almost doomy at times, especially towards the end. More of Travis's chaotic screaming in key before eventually, after a certain section, he gets into this like huge high black metal screech. But then you get to the second half, or more than halfway through the song, you get this arguably the darkest part of Cattle Decapitation history, with this keyboard, like, I don't know how you call it, cinematic approach before it gets into this almost doom section, and then Travis doing a little bit of clean vocals before going back to his screaming in key. When I first heard this song, when it was released on YouTube a week or so ago, I was blown away again. Like, this band and this album managed to blow me away, and it's been a little while since I've had an album that's really made me want to smash my dick in a good sense. But nonetheless, however, top to bottom, musically speaking, a lot of brutality, a little bit of melody, some technicality, and lyrically speaking, as I brought up in the outset, their darkest, bleakest album in terms of lyrics, all about the apocalypse and everything like that. And hell, if you search up the Decibel magazine cover that Cattle Decapitation did recently, pretty much tells you what this album is going to be all about, with everybody in like Grim Reaper hoods, Travis with a Reaper scythe. And also a common theme throughout the album is fire. And hell, if you look at the album cover up there, it tells you what this album's going to be all about. So, vicious onslaught of an album this was, with a lot of creativity. So much creativity in here. Progressive death metal with some technical elements and a tiny dash of grind, depending on how you would define it to be. But I think it's safe to say that this album is going to go down as arguably Cattle Decapitation's finest work. Definitely their most creative, their most diverse, and I would argue their best album they've ever done. Now, the score, on the other hand, so far this year there's only been one album that has gotten a perfect score of 40 out of 40, and that was Swallow the Sun, When a Shadow is Forced into the Light, and that was all the way back in January. Well, Swallow the Sun, you just got a brother in the perfect score range. I give this album a 40 out of 40. This is a perfect album in my opinion, top to bottom. amazing brutality, but great sense of melody, a lot of creativity, a lot of progressive influence coming in as far as how they structure the songs and not going verse, chorus, bridge, apart from a couple of tracks. But nonetheless, this, I don't have really any other words to describe it. Buy this album. You will thank me. And just wow. Me trying to do this review and the way I did doesn't do this album justice. You need to listen to it. You will be blown away. I guarantee it. So anyways, thank you guys for watching this review for Death Atlas. What did you guys think of this album? Let me know in the comments below. And that's it for album reviews on camera for 2019. The next time you see me do an album review on camera will be in 2020. And 2020 is looking to be an interesting year, so... But for those of you who still want to see me do album reviews, go to my Twitter and keep an eye out for any reviews I might do in the next week or so, because here in about a week or two, we're going to be doing, for the Horseman podcast, the top 10 album of the year list for 2019. And no doubt this album's going to be on my list for sure. Will it be in the top? We'll see. I gotta listen back to a bunch of albums from this year to figure out how I'm going to do that list, but we'll see what happens. But anyways, peace out, and I will see you very, very soon. Well, it was Dorian Facepuncher who led the first lap of the day, as he's got his teammate Dylan Young right behind him, as they're both out of Young Motorsports working together for the time being. And then I see two Gibbs cars working together. Although I think I just saw, oh my goodness, a massive crash. This is the huge one at Talladega. That's about half the field in a car flipping wildly. That's Anthony McCrory. Holy cow.